The air was thick with tension as she sat alone, hidden away in the quiet corner of the park. The world around her continued its usual rhythm, people chatting, children laughing, and the occasional car driving by. But for her, everything felt like it was happening in slow motion, as if she were in a bubble, completely separated from the life around her. She wasn't sure how long she had been sitting there, her knees drawn up to her chest, her fingers clenched tightly around the phone in her hands. It wasn't that she wanted to reach out to anyone. It was that she needed to. Every nerve in her body screamed for help. She could feel her heart racing, thumping against her chest like a drumbeat she couldn't escape. The situation was far too much for her to handle on her own. The streets were dangerous, the people around her unpredictable. She didn't know where to go, who to trust, or if anyone would even listen. The only thing she could do was send out a signal, praying someone, anyone, would notice. She wasn't sure why she had picked today to make that desperate call for help, but in the pit of her stomach she knew it was the only option left. She typed the message with shaking hands. SOS. There wasn't time for anything else. She pressed send, unsure if anyone would see the message or if help would come in time. Meanwhile, far across the city, two of the world's most recognized figures were living lives completely different from hers. One of them was sitting in his gym finishing up a workout. He wasn't just a champion wrestler. He was a symbol of strength and confidence, with a reputation that reached across continents. His name was known everywhere, from Hollywood to the wrestling ring. Yet on this day, he wasn't thinking about his fame or his next movie role. Instead, he was lost in his thoughts, trying to get through a workout that had been harder than usual. The other man was at home, sitting at his kitchen table. The room was quiet, save for the sound of a cup being set down. A professional wrestler turned actor, he had built an impressive career and earned a reputation as a kind, hard-working individual. Despite being surrounded by success, he always seemed to care more about people than his own accolades. He often found peace in helping others, and today was no different. He was reading through emails when the sudden buzzing of his phone interrupted his quiet moment. It wasn't a typical message, not from anyone he knew. The message came from an unknown number, the kind that stood out, the kind that felt urgent. Both men, unaware of what had just happened, received the same SOS signal. The message was brief, and the sense of panic in it was palpable. They both read it, and for a brief moment they shared the same feeling: confusion. Who could have sent this? Why? For a moment, neither of them knew what to do. They had no idea what kind of situation they were dealing with, but there was something about the message that pulled at something deep inside them. It wasn't just an ordinary cry for help. It was as if the person who sent it was screaming for someone to notice, someone to act before it was too late. The first to act was the man in the gym. He looked at his phone for a second longer, his brow furrowing. There was something familiar about the sense of urgency in the message, a feeling that he had felt before in his own life, though he couldn't quite pinpoint where. But whatever it was, he couldn't ignore it. He immediately put his phone down and began pulling on his jacket. He didn't know who was in trouble or where they were, but he wasn't about to wait around. Across town, the other man sat frozen, staring at his phone. The hair on the back of his neck stood up, a chill running through him as he read the message again. His gut told him something was wrong. He had learned over the years to trust his instincts, and they were telling him that this was serious. Without hesitation, he grabbed his keys and ran out the door. The time for asking questions or waiting for more information had passed. This was a call for help, and he wouldn't let it go unanswered. Both men were driven by a sense of purpose that was impossible to ignore. Neither had any personal connection to the sender, but in that moment they shared something deeper than fame or career. They both understood what it meant to be in need, to be vulnerable, to be helpless. That understanding is what pushed them to act. As they headed toward the unknown, their minds raced with questions. Who was in danger? Where were they? What could they do to help? But the one thing they didn't question was their decision to help. They didn't need to understand everything to know that someone was in trouble, and that was all that mattered. The girl, on the other hand, sat waiting, clinging to the hope that her message would be seen. She wasn't sure what she expected when she pressed send. Maybe no one would respond. Maybe it was foolish to think that help would come. But she couldn't stop herself from hoping. She knew that if she just waited long enough, someone would notice. Someone would care enough to step in. Minutes passed, then hours. Each second felt like a lifetime. The sounds around her were muffled, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt a little less alone with every passing minute, even though no one had shown up yet. She still didn't know who had received the message, but the thought that someone somewhere might be on their way gave her the strength to keep holding on. The sun had begun to set, casting an orange glow across the city. The park that had been bustling with life earlier now seemed quieter, almost eerie. The girl's fingers gripped her phone a little tighter as the darkness grew around her. Her mind was racing, but her body felt numb from the cold and fear. She glanced at her phone again, her heart skipping a beat. There was a new message. It was from one of the men. It didn't say much, just a simple "We're coming." Her heart soared as a small glimmer of hope filled her chest. She hadn't been forgotten. There were people out there, real people who cared enough to help. She hadn't imagined the SOS message reaching anyone at all, but now there it was, the response she'd been hoping for. Both The Rock and John Cena were now on their way. She could only pray they would get there in time. The weight of the moment was too much to bear. But with her hope rekindled, she stayed alert, watching the horizon and waiting for a sign of her rescuers. As darkness fell, the world around her grew even quieter. It felt like everything had paused, waiting for the next moment to unfold. Little did she know, The Rock and John Cena were both determined to make sure she wasn't alone for much longer. The feeling of urgency hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Both The Rock and John Cena had received the same SOS message. They didn't know who the sender was, where they were, or even if they would find them in time, but the gravity of the situation pushed them forward. There was no turning back now. They had a responsibility to act, and that's exactly what they planned to do. The Rock was the first to arrive at the rendezvous point. He pulled his car into a quiet parking lot, the headlights casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. His mind was racing, but he focused on the task at hand. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew one thing. He wasn't going to let this girl face whatever she was up against alone. That thought gave him the strength to ignore the nagging uncertainty gnawing at him. He sat for a moment staring at the empty lot, trying to gather his thoughts. His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his trance. It was a message from Cena. "We're not far, but there's a lot of ground to cover. I'll meet you soon." The Rock exhaled, a mix of relief and anxiety flooding through him. The feeling of being on his own was slipping away. He wasn't alone in this. They were in this together. A few minutes later, Cena arrived. He parked beside The Rock's car and got out, his face hard with determination. Despite the calm that he often exuded, even Cena could feel the pressure mounting. Every second that passed brought them closer to something unknown. Something that could go terribly wrong. Or something that could save a life. "Ready?" Cena asked, his voice steady but serious. "As ready as I'll ever be," The Rock replied, his voice gruff. He had been through a lot in his life, wrestling matches, movie sets, even life-or-death situations. But something about this was different. It wasn't just a mission or a challenge. It was a person in need, and that changed everything. They didn't waste any more time. The two of them set off toward the last known location of the girl, relying on the vague details from the SOS message. It was a part of the city they didn't frequent, a less traveled area that felt quieter and more dangerous than the bright lights of the places they were used to. The streets here were darker, the corners filled with shadows that seemed to watch them as they walked. "Any ideas where to start?" Cena asked, scanning their surroundings. The Rock glanced at him, his mind quickly going over the possibilities. He had faced tough situations before, but nothing quite like this. "We'll start with the park. That's where she sent the message from. If she's still there, we'll find her." Cena nodded and they moved on. The closer they got to the park, the more uneasy they both felt. It wasn't just the eerie quiet or the dim lighting. There was something in the air, a sense of danger that neither of them could shake. They reached the park and split up, each taking a different route. They knew the girl's message had been sent in haste, and it was likely that she was scared and alone. They had to cover every inch, leaving no stone unturned. As The Rock moved through the park, he could feel his heart pounding harder with each step. He tried to stay calm, to think logically, but every creak of a branch, every distant sound made him tense. His mind flashed to memories of other rescues, other missions, but this was different. It wasn't just about finding the person. It was about saving them. He paused at the edge of a small, deserted clearing, listening carefully. Nothing. The sound of his own breathing was all he could hear. He took a step forward and then another, But there was still no sign of the girl. A part of him began to wonder if they were too late. What if the message had been sent too late? What if she had already been taken, or worse? "Dwayne!" Cena's voice cut through his thoughts. He turned, relief flooding through him when he saw Cena approaching, his face lit by the faint glow of a nearby street lamp. "Anything?" Cena asked. The Rock shook his head. "Not yet. It's too quiet here." "I don't like it." Cena didn't reply immediately. He took a step closer and looked around. "We keep moving. She has to be somewhere." They continued searching, moving through the park with steady determination. Every so often they'd call out for her, hoping for a response. But there was nothing, just the silence of the dark night. As time went on, their hope began to fade. They couldn't keep searching indefinitely, and the feeling of dread crept in. Had the girl been moved? Had something happened to her? Their minds raced with possibilities. They could still hear each other's voices, but there was a growing sense that maybe they were looking in the wrong place. "I don't get it," the Rock muttered. "If she was here, where would she have gone?" Cena's gaze scanned the park, his eyes narrowing. "Let's keep looking. We might be missing something." It was then that Cena noticed a faint glimmer in the distance. He stopped in his tracks and pointed. "Look." The Rock followed his gaze and spotted a small, barely visible object, what looked like a piece of clothing, caught on the low branches of a bush. It was the only sign they had found in over an hour of searching. "That's got to be her," the Rock said, his voice urgent now. Without a second thought, they moved toward it, their pace quickening as they neared the bushes. As they reached the spot, they found a small, crumpled jacket caught in the branches. It was an old, worn piece of clothing, but it was enough of a clue to make them believe they were on the right track. "Something happened here," Cena said, kneeling to examine the jacket. "She might have been trying to get away." The Rock knelt beside him, frowning. The girl had clearly been here, but where was she now? The jacket was a sign that she hadn't been alone when she sent the SOS. She was in danger, and that danger was still present. "We need to hurry," the Rock said, his voice sharp with urgency. "We're close." They stood up, their eyes now scanning the area with new intensity. It wasn't just about finding the girl anymore. It was about stopping whatever danger had been closing in on her. The night had become their enemy, and time was slipping away. The park was eerily quiet now. The rustling of leaves in the wind was the only sound, but even that felt like it was holding its breath. The Rock and Cena stood near the bushes, staring at the jacket, their minds working at a mile a minute. The brief moment of hope that they had felt when they found the piece of clothing was quickly replaced by a growing sense of urgency. The jacket didn't just signify the girl's presence, it signified the danger that was closing in on her. "Do you think someone took her?" Cena asked, his voice low but full of concern. "I don't know," the Rock replied, running his fingers through his hair. "But it's clear something's happened here. We're not the only ones looking for her." Cena's jaw tightened. He looked at the path ahead, his eyes scanning the area, taking in every shadow, every movement. He could feel it in his gut. The girl was out there somewhere. She was scared, but she was still holding on. "We'll find her," he said, more to himself than to the Rock. But the Rock didn't answer right away. He looked around, his gaze sharp. There was a flicker of something in the darkness, a feeling that the danger wasn't over, that it was only just beginning. His mind raced, trying to piece together the situation. There was something they were missing, something important. The two of them had already covered a lot of ground, but they were still in the dark. They needed more clues, more direction, and the more they searched, the more they realized just how vast this area was. The park stretched out for miles, and it seemed to swallow them whole with every step they took. "This is getting nowhere," the Rock muttered, frustration seeping into his voice. "We're looking in all the wrong places." Cena looked at him. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," the Rock said, his brows furrowing. "But it feels off. It's like we're not being led in the right direction." Cena stood still for a moment, thinking. His instincts told him something was wrong too. They hadn't found any solid leads. No signs of struggle, no fresh footprints, no real trace of where the girl had gone. And yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that she was nearby. "Maybe we need to think outside the box," Cena suggested, looking around. "What if she's not even here anymore? What if she was moved?" The Rock's eyes narrowed. "Moved?" Cena nodded. "Yeah, I mean, look at all this. It's too quiet. Too empty. It's almost like someone's trying to keep us from finding her." The idea hit the rock like a bolt of lightning. Of course, the girl had been trying to escape, and whoever had been after her wasn't going to make it easy. They had to think like her, the girl who had sent that SOS. She was hiding for a reason. And if they were going to find her, they needed to stop thinking like they were looking for someone in danger. They needed to think like they were looking for someone who was being hunted. "Let's move," the rock said, his voice suddenly urgent. "We need to head to the perimeter. If she's been moved, that's where they'll have taken her." Cena didn't hesitate. He followed the rock as they moved quickly toward the far end of the park, away from the center where they had been looking. Every step felt like it took them deeper into an unknown territory. There were fewer people around, and the silence felt heavier now, like they were walking into something dangerous, something they couldn't see. "Do you think she's been hurt?" Cena asked, his voice quieter now, more serious. The rock shook his head. "I don't know. I just know we can't stop looking. She's still out there. I can feel it." Cena said nothing, but the doubt was in his eyes. He wasn't sure if they were running toward the right direction, but he trusted the rock. There was no time to question. They had to keep moving. The perimeter of the park was less well lit, with only the occasional streetlight casting a faint glow on the path. The deeper they went, the more the world around them seemed to fade into shadow. The trees were thicker here, and the open spaces had given way to dense underbrush that slowed their pace. "Stay sharp," the rock whispered. "We're getting closer." As they rounded a corner, something caught Cena's eye. A faint glow of light barely visible through the trees. He held up a hand, signaling the rock to stop. They crouched low, moving silently toward the light. The closer they got, the more they could make out. The light was coming from a small clearing up ahead, barely visible between the trees. It was dim, but it was enough to make out a figure standing there, too still, too silent. "Who is that?" Cena asked, his voice barely a whisper. The rock squinted, trying to make out the figure. He felt his pulse quicken. "I don't know, but we need to find out." They moved closer, their steps cautious and deliberate. The figure ahead didn't move, didn't seem to notice them coming. The closer they got, the clearer it became. It was a man standing motionless, staring into the distance. "Stay back," the rock whispered. "I'll approach him." Cena nodded and hung back, staying hidden in the shadows. The rock moved forward, his steps light and quiet, like a predator stalking its prey. He was only a few feet away when the man suddenly turned and the rock froze. For a moment, there was no sound. Then, the man spoke, his voice cold and emotionless. "You're wasting your time," he said, his eyes locking onto the rocks with an unnerving calmness. The rock's muscles tensed. "What do you know about the girl?" The man didn't flinch, didn't even blink. "I know enough. You should turn back before things get worse." "Oh, not going to happen," the rock replied, his voice firm. He wasn't about to back down now. Not when they were so close. The man's lips curled into a small smile, almost as if he were enjoying this. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." Before the rock could respond, the man turned and began walking away. The rock's instinct screamed at him to follow, but something told him this wasn't the time for a chase. This wasn't just about finding the girl. It was about uncovering the truth. And they were on the edge of discovering something far bigger than either of them had realized. As the man disappeared into the trees, the rock turned back to Cena, his face grim. "We've got company," he muttered. Cena's eyes narrowed and his jaw tightened. "We're getting close," the rock nodded. "Too close. Let's keep moving." They were on the edge of something much darker than they had imagined. The girl's SOS signal wasn't just a cry for help. It was a warning. And now they had no choice but to keep moving forward. The air felt heavier now, thicker with an unknown tension. The rock and Cena stood at the edge of the trees, staring into the darkness. The man they had just encountered had disappeared without a trace, and their instincts told them that they were getting closer to something much more dangerous than they had imagined. Whoever the girl had been trying to escape from, they were no ordinary threats. "We need to be careful," the rock said, his voice low but urgent. "Whoever's behind this, they're playing a game, and we don't know all the rules." Cena nodded, his eyes scanning the surroundings. "We're getting close, but something doesn't feel right. We're being led into a trap." "Exactly," the rock replied. "But we're not backing down now. We're in this." Cena's jaw tightened. No turning back. They both stood in the shadow of the trees for a moment longer, letting the weight of the situation sink in. The path ahead was unclear, but they knew they couldn't stop. Not now. Not when there was a girl out there still needing their help. Let's move, the rock said, his tone resolute. They started walking, pushing forward into the unknown. The closer they got to the edge of the park, the more unsettling the atmosphere became. It was almost as if the world around them was holding its breath. The lights from the street seemed miles away, the sounds of the city muted, leaving only the noise of their footsteps. As they ventured deeper into the darkened area, the rock felt his senses heighten. His body was on high alert, every muscle tense, ready to react to any danger that might appear. He had been in tough situations before, but this one felt different. It was as if they were playing against an unseen force, one that could be anywhere and everywhere. Every shadow felt like it could hold a threat. Every rustle of leaves could be the sound of someone closing in on them. "You think she's still around here?" Cena asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not sure," the rock replied, scanning the darkened trees. "But if she is, we're getting close." The words felt hollow, but the rock knew they couldn't waste any more time questioning their decisions. They had to keep moving no matter how dangerous it felt. They reached the edge of the park where the trees started to thin out, and they found themselves standing at the entrance of a long, deserted street. There were no lights here, only the dim glow of a far-off street lamp. It felt empty, abandoned. "This is where it ends," Cena muttered. "The street's a dead end." "Maybe it's where it begins," the rock replied, his eyes narrowing as he looked down the road. "Something's waiting for us down there." The two of them stood still, watching the road stretch out ahead. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They both knew this was the point of no return. Whatever waited down that road could change everything. But there was no turning back now. "We stick together," the rock said. "And we don't stop until we find her." Cena nodded, his expression resolute. "Let's go." They began walking down the street, keeping close to the shadows, staying low and moving quietly. Every step felt like it took them deeper into a mystery they didn't fully understand. They didn't know who was pulling the strings or why the girl had been caught up in this situation, but they were determined to find out. As they walked, the rock's mind kept running through every possibility. Had the girl been moved to another location? Had she been forced into hiding? Or worse, had they already gotten to her? The unknown weighed heavily on him, but he pushed it aside. They couldn't afford to think about that. Not yet. The silence of the street was almost suffocating. The occasional gust of wind rattled the leaves, but other than that, it was dead quiet. It was almost as if the world had shut down around them. No cars passed by. No distant sounds of people, nothing. Suddenly, the rock stopped in his tracks, his hand shooting out to grab Cena's arm. Cena tensed but didn't move, his eyes searching the darkness. "Did you hear that?" the rock whispered. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. They stood frozen, straining to listen. Then in the distance, they heard it, a faint, barely audible cry. It was coming from somewhere farther down the street, further into the darkness. The girl. Without a word, both men started running toward the sound. Their feet hit the pavement hard, the sound of their running shoes echoing in the quiet night. Every step felt like it brought them closer, but also like it stretched the distance even farther. The closer they got, the louder the cries became. They weren't screams, not yet, but they were enough to make both men's hearts race. They could feel the danger now, the undeniable truth that the girl was in immediate need of help. Then, just as they rounded a corner, they saw her. The girl was sitting on the ground, her back pressed against the side of a building, trembling. Her clothes were torn, her face pale and streaked with dirt. She looked up as she heard their footsteps, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and relief. "They found me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You found me." The rock rushed forward, his heart pounding in his chest. "You're okay now," he said, kneeling beside her. "We've got you." But as he reached out to help her up, a figure emerged from the shadows, standing at the entrance of an alleyway. It was a man, tall and imposing, with a look of cold determination in his eyes. "You should have stayed away," the man said, his voice low and threatening. "Now you've gone and made things worse." Cena immediately stepped in front of the rock, his body tense, ready for anything. "You want to explain what's going on here?" he asked, his voice strong and steady. The man's lips curled into a sneer. "You think you can stop this? You don't even know what's at stake." "We're not leaving without her," the rock said firmly, "and we're not letting you hurt anyone else." The man took a step forward, but then stopped as if he'd just realized something. "You're both so sure of yourselves," he said, his voice now tinged with amusement. "But you're in over your heads." The Rock didn't flinch. "We're not afraid of you." The man grinned, then reached into his jacket. For a moment, both The Rock and Cena braced for the worst. But to their surprise, the man pulled out a phone, holding it up toward them. "I don't think you understand," the man said. "I've been tracking you both. You've been playing right into my hands this whole time." The Rock's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" The man's grin widened as he looked at the phone's screen, where a message was displayed. "The girl isn't the only one in danger." The man with the phone stood a few feet away, his eyes glinting in the dim light. The Rock and Cena remained still, their attention fixed on him, trying to make sense of the new turn of events. The girl, still trembling, had backed into the wall of the building, clearly frightened by the man's presence. But there was something in her eyes, too, a glimmer of hope. She had seen them come for her, and that alone gave her the strength to hold on. "You think you've won?" the man sneered, glancing at his phone once more. "You don't even understand what you're up against." The Rock's jaw tightened. "We know exactly what we're up against. Now tell us what's going on." The man laughed, the sound cold and cruel. "You're not even close to understanding the bigger picture." He held the phone out toward them, showing a message on the screen. "You think you're helping this girl, but the truth is, she's just one part of something much bigger. You're in the middle of something you'll never be able to stop." The words hit them hard. It wasn't just about the girl. It was about something more, something they hadn't seen coming. The Rock and Cena exchanged a quick glance. They had thought they were simply rescuing a girl in need, but now they realized they were dealing with a much larger, more dangerous situation. "What is it that you want?" Cena asked, his voice calm but firm. The man grinned. "What I want doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what happens next. You've already set things in motion, and now it's too late to stop it." The tension in the air thickened. The Rock and Cena were not ones to back down from a challenge, especially not when it involved protecting someone who needed their help. But this man, whoever he was, seemed to be a step ahead. It was clear that they were up against something far more dangerous than they had anticipated. "We don't care what you're trying to do," The Rock said, taking a step forward. "We're taking her with us. Whatever game you're playing, we're not playing along." The man didn't flinch, but his smile faded. "You still don't get it, do you? You're not walking out of here with her. This is bigger than you, bigger than anything you can imagine." The Rock's eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that." Without warning, the man reached into his jacket again, but this time he didn't pull out a phone. Instead, he revealed a small, sleek device. The Rock's instinct screamed danger, and in that split second, he lunged forward, grabbing Cena's arm and pulling him back. "Get down!" The Rock shouted. The man pressed a button on the device, and suddenly the ground beneath them rumbled. The air crackled with tension, and a low hum filled the night. A hidden mechanism clicked into place, and before they knew it, the entire area was surrounded by an electrified barrier. "You're trapped now," the man said, his voice full of dark satisfaction. "You're not going anywhere, not without paying the price." The Rock and Cena looked around, realizing they had been surrounded. The electric barrier buzzed around them, a silent warning that they couldn't cross without consequences. The situation had just become far more dangerous than they had imagined. But even as they felt the weight of the trap closing in on them, neither man showed any sign of fear. They had been in tight spots before, and they knew how to handle themselves. This wasn't the end, it was just another challenge, and they weren't about to give up. "We've been through worse than this," Cena said, gritting his teeth. "And we'll get through it again." The Rock nodded. "We don't back down. Not now, not ever." With a determined look, The Rock and Cena took a few steps back, trying to gauge the best way out of their situation. They knew the barrier was designed to keep them in, but they weren't about to give up just because things looked tough. They had something the man didn't understand: teamwork, heart, and the drive to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The girl, still against the wall, looked up at them. Her eyes were filled with a mixture of fear and hope. "Please, you have to get me out of here," she whispered. "I can't go back." "They'll—" Her voice trailed off, and the man's smirk grew wider. "She knows the truth. She knows too much," he said, looking at the girl with something that almost resembled contempt. "That's why she's here, and that's why she's not leaving." The words made something click in The Rock's mind. The girl had been running from something bigger, something connected to this man and the trap that had just been set. Whatever this was, it wasn't just about her. It was about a larger plan that involved far more people. They hadn't just been saving a girl. They had stepped into a world of danger, deception, and power that was bigger than anything they had ever faced. "We're getting you out of here," Cena said, his voice steady. He was already assessing the situation, his mind working fast. "You're not alone anymore. We're not leaving without you." The girl's eyes filled with tears. "But they'll never stop coming. They'll find me again." "We'll make sure they don't," The Rock replied firmly. "You're safe now. We're taking you somewhere they can't reach you." The man's laughter echoed through the night. "You really think you can escape from this? You think you can outsmart me? You've played right into my hands." The Rock and Cena exchanged another glance. This man was dangerous, but they weren't backing down. They had come this far and they weren't going to let him win. Not now. Suddenly, The Rock had an idea. He turned to Cena. "We need to overload the system. I'll draw his attention, get him focused on me. You get to that device. Shut it down before it's too late." Cena nodded. "Got it." The Rock took a deep breath, stepping forward with a confident look on his face. "Hey!" he shouted, his voice carrying across the empty street. "Is that all you've got? You're gonna need more than a little electric fence to stop us." The man's expression darkened. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe," The Rock said, a grin tugging at the corner of his lips. "But I've never been one to play by the rules." With that, The Rock lunged at the man, charging toward him with everything he had. The man reacted quickly, trying to press another button on the device, but The Rock was faster. He tackled the man to the ground, knocking the device from his hands. The hum of the barrier started to fade as the device was disabled. Cena wasted no time. He sprinted toward the fallen device, grabbing it before the man could recover. With a quick flick of his fingers, he ripped the wires apart, sending sparks flying into the night. The barrier around them fizzled and died, leaving them free to move. The Rock stood over the man, breathing heavily but grinning. "I told you we weren't backing down." With the device destroyed and the barrier gone, the two men turned to the girl. She was staring at them, a look of disbelief on her face. For the first time, she smiled, a small, fragile smile that spoke volumes. "We're not letting you go back to that life," Cena said, his voice soft but filled with resolve. "You're free." The girl nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Thank you for saving me." The Rock placed a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to thank us. We do this because it's the right thing. Now let's get you somewhere safe." As they walked away, the night felt a little less dark. The threat that had loomed over them was gone, but the battle had changed something in them. They hadn't just rescued a girl. They had stepped into a world where things weren't always as simple as they seemed. But as long as they stood together, they knew they could face whatever came next.